Hey everyone. Welcome to well, if I've done this one already, then I apologize, but if not, I want to welcome you to a Cartoon Flashback HD edition as we take a look at Disney's Gummy Bears. Now, Gummy Bears, in case some of you don't know, debuted back in 1985. 1985. Almost 30 years ago. Essentially, as of this month, ladies and gentlemen, sorry about this, but essentially as of this month, 28 years ago. It's hard to believe. 28 or 29, depending on how you count it or how you look at it. Between 28 and 29 years ago, almost 30 years ago. Again, depending on how you count it and how you look at it, if you will. But basically about 30 years ago, folks, almost 30 years I should say, this show debuted. And it debuted, believe it or not, on NBC. It's got quite the track record, folks. It does. It's got quite the track record, and let me explain why. It's got quite the track record, if you will. You see, back in, of course, like I said, debuted in 1985 on NBC. At that time, it didn't matter what show you were. If you were on a certain network, that was your home network, if you will. Oops, that's my fault. Again, like I said, if you debuted on a certain home network, that was your network for a couple of seasons, if not a season. Now, at the same time, two other Disney shows debuted as well. The Wuzzles on CBS, which lasted for about a year, and The New Adventures of Winnie the Pooh, which lasted for a long time on ABC, from what I understand. Now, because of that, Gummy Bears lasted on NBC for a couple of years, and then eventually moved on to ABC each Saturday mornings alongside Winnie the Pooh. This was also at the same time, I think, between the mid to late 80s, mainly around the late 80s, where Gummy Bears, along with Winnie the Pooh, started to go not just onto ABC, but also started to go into syndication as well. This was, of course, a couple of years before the Disney afternoon would come into play. Now, the Disney afternoon, of course, came into play in 1990, and the Gummy Bears, because they were the oldest show, one of the first ones, if you will, was placed at the beginning of the Disney afternoon. Now, new animation of the Gummy Bears was added in for the intro, the original intro, for the first season intro, as well as several other intros as well. Mainly the first season intro of Disney Afternoon, there was some new animation added in, and of course the Gummies did show up in the later ones as well, until they decided to go to the TDA intro, if you know what I mean. But anyway, Gummy Bears lasted for many years. It was and it won several Emmys. It definitely developed a huge fan base. And it actually, across the pond in England, actually had a couple of theatrical releases. Yeah. Some of the episodes that aired as regular standard episodes here in the United States, whether they were 22-minute episodes or 11-minute episodes or 11-minute cartoon shorts, aired as theatrical featurettes before movies, mainly Disney movies, in the UK and several other England and European markets. For example, the pilot episode, which is, can't think of the name right now, I should look at it, shouldn't I? New Beginning, that's what it is. I think that's the one. Let me see if it's in here. It should be in volume 1. Yeah, New Beginning. That was one of those that was aired as a featurette on, in UK, like I said, England and European theaters. It was aired as a featurette. And again, like I said, several others that I can't think of right now that are probably on that DVD set were also shown as featurettes in UK, European, and England, and in UK, European theatrical markets. Never here, not once here in the US did we have that for the Gummy Bears. Only there because, of course, Gummy Bears was very popular over there because, I guess, of the origins and stuff like that, the stories and whatever. Now, what's funny about the history of this is, I think Michael Eisner, who was in charge of Disney at the time, I guess as the story goes, one of his kids or something like that was eating some gummy bears, the gummy bear candies, and it just sprung on him, let's make a show about gummy bears. But it couldn't be, just a show about gummy, but the thing was, okay, make a show about the gummy bears, but you can't make a show, but the obvious thing was, I guess to Michael Eisner, was you couldn't just make a show about, gummy bear, living, breathing gummy bear candy. No, you had to do something different. And what he did, of course, as you could see in the show, was take an example of the different colors of the gummies, of the gummy candies, and the gummy bear candies, and decided, let's imply that into the show. Let's just color the characters. Let's just make the gummies different colors. There you go. And that's how that came to be. And of course, the bouncing aspect, that came from the gummy bear juice deal, and so on and so forth. They did have, inspiration from the candy, but mainly it was the coloring of the characters, and then the juice part was a little bit different. Actually, get this, the gummy bear juice deal, from what I understand, according to sources, actually had come under fire at times through controversy because of the fact that basically the message being sent was drink this and you can bounce high, or you can have special powers or something like that. I don't know, it was just some kind of situation that went down. It wasn't very serious or anything, but it was it caused the message, I think, was getting mixed up there, and was causing some controversy from what I understand. Now, throughout the later years, the series also added in other characters besides the gummies and, of course, the human allies, and in the introduction of Gusto, which was about a season later or so, or later on the first season or a season later. Gusto came on basically later on, I should say, about later the first season, or basically throughout the second season. And of course you had Chummy Gummy, who was a one-time appearance, and things like that. You had the Knights of Gummadoon. And then of course you had another group of gummies that became very popular with the fan base, and that was the Barbics. And people really got behind the Barbics because, yeah, they were gummy bears, but they were more like, hey, we depend on our skill, on our fighting and all that, on our techniques, instead of relying on, hey, we just drink the juice, we're going to bounce and bounce and bounce. And people liked that because basically they were like, the Barbics were basically, they were heroes, they were good gummies, but they were kind of like the anti-heroes. They were good gummies, but they had different kind of methods. They basically, as some people have pointed out, the views with the Glen gummies kind of clashed at times. So that of course made them a very popular group. It made them a very popular characters as well. And then of course you had Sir Thornberry, who was the last survivor, who was the lone Gummy in the city of Usala, if you will. And that was kind of cool as well. That was the one thing about this show. It explored all the backgrounds and mythos and history of the characters and everything. And it always had a goal in mind. That was the one thing about Gummy Bears. It always had a goal in mind. That main plot point and goal for the Gummies was to get the great Gummies back. And from what we understand when you watch the show, the history on that is because of the humans being greedy and wanting all the Gummy secrets for themselves and basically going to war with the Gummies, or the great Gummies, decided, you know what? Basically the great Gummies are like, you know what? We don't need this. We're going to go basically to a new place called New Gumbaria, which they basically dubbed New Gumbaria, which is, I guess you could say, the equivalent of North America, United States. And they said, we're going to go there until the time is right for us to come back, until we get word that the time is right for us to come back. And basically you have some Gummies that they left behind that say, hey, look, you guys are going to be, you're the Glen Gummies, and your guys' job is to let us know when it's safe to come back. Now you might find that a little ironic if you watch the episode Knights of Gummadune, because Gruffy in that episode mentions to Cubby, when Cubby kind of gets a little anti-authority, if you will, Gruffy has to tell Cubby, hey, look, these guys are the Knights of Gummadune. He doesn't call them the Knights of Gummadune or anything. Basically, Gruffy in that episode, like I said, when Cubby becomes a little anti-authority against some of the decisions that the council of Gummadune is making, Gruffy acknowledges that council as the great Gummies. So basically, it's not just the great Gummies of like New Gumbaria and all that, it's also the great Gummies of, magic and all that. Like, okay, we'll appear every now and then kind of deal. Now, again, that was the interesting aspect about the show. You got to dive in to the backgrounds of the Gummy Bear history, of the Gummy Bear culture. Now, of course, every show has to have an antagonist. And this one, just like a lot of Disney shows that came after it, didn't just have one, but had several antagonists. Two primary antagonists, of course, was Duke Igthorn. He was the #1 primary antagonist because basically his main goal, basically the history with Igthorn was he used to be a knight. That's right, he used to be a knight for the Dunwin Kingdom, but because he didn't get what he felt he deserved, which was ascending to being the king or something like that, he was basically tossed out. Basically, he was trying to. Igthorn, from what I understand, was trying to overthrow, trying to corrupt, or do a coup, do a coup on the kingdom. Basically, tried to take over, but because he got caught, he was tossed out. And the other primary antagonist was Lady Bane. We'll get into her in a second. Now, getting back to Duke Igthorn, his primary goal after that, because not only was he banished, but he was able to, through his banishment, able to assemble an army of ogres with a little ogre as sort of like a second in command named Toadwort, who became a very popular character himself. But also he was able to find a castle in a place called Trekmore, which is basically the Netherworld version, I guess you could say, or the Nega version, basically the dark version of the Dunwin Kingdom. It's basically like, okay, if you look at Lion King, for example, you have the shadowy place, right? Which is beyond the borders of the Pride Land. Which is basically the elephant graveyard, whatever you want to call it. And basically, we know in The Lion King, Simba is forbidden from going there, but yet he and Nala go there. That's basically what Drekmore is. It's basically, it's a place you don't want to go. But anyway, that's where Ichthorn has his base at. But his goal is to get out of Drekmore and conquer Dunwin. Now, Dunwin does end up getting conquered several times. It does. It does end up being conquered several times. Not just by Ichthorn, which was like temporarily, there was temporary instances here and there, but it gets conquered by Toadwort, of one, for example, because he put on some magic armor. And there were several other instances as well. Now, of course, like I said, that was the one thing about the show. It had a primary goal, not just for the protagonists, the Gummies, to get the great Gummies back, but it was also had a goal for the antagonist, which was, hey, I want to conquer. I want to rule. And as soon as he discovers, right in the first episode, as soon as he finds out about the gummy bears, and then finds out that gummy berry juice basically not only allows gummies to bounce, but gives humans super strength, which is where that controversy came in. His main goal is to not only conquer Dunwin, if you will, but his other goal to go along with it, but the other part of his goal to go along with it is to obtain the secret of the gummy berry juice and use that to help conquer the city, or conquer the kingdom. Now, again, you also, like I said, you also have another character called Lady Bane. Lady Bane basically believes in the gummies, and just like the gummies, thanks to Calvin, who gave it to them, she too, by her own merits, or her own way, has a gummy medallion. And her main goal is, she wants to conquer Dunwin. She wants to conquer the world, whatever you want to call it. But her main goal is to get the great book. And she does on several occasions. She does end up getting the great book on several occasions, but she ends up losing it back to the gummies, which is kind of cool. And I like one of the things about her too. When she obtains something that's not hers, like the great book, and someone tries to retrieve it, she basically points out and says, hey, hands off my things, or nobody touches my things. Basically, she claims it as her own, which is really cool. Now, the great book itself played an integral part in the series as well. The great book, at one point, and this was, I think, later on in the 4th or 5th season, it ends up getting destroyed accidentally by Gruffy. And not just destroyed, it gets burned by accident. And Gruffy takes it upon himself, with some unknown assistance by Cubby until later on, to go to Usalia and try to retrieve another great book. Now, it's not the first time either. The great book has had its pages torn out. Gruffy has accidentally ripped a page out to where Snummy, in retaliation, does a spell to where it's like on a Dr. Jekyll Hyde spell to where Gruffy's nice, but if you say the thank you word, he goes in complete psycho mode, or whatever you want to call it. So it's been there. The great book also allows, Zummy, who's like basically the bookkeeper of it, to write down historical moments. Like when they met Calvin, and when Sonny kind of earned a certain position, and Cubby did something right, and things like that. So it too played an integral part. Now, the one thing that the Gummy Bears have in common with any Disney afternoon show, with probably just one Disney afternoon show, according to several fans, which is Gargoyles, is both had proper series finales. Now, you might say, well, Gargoyles still continued on with the Goliath Chronicles. Yeah, they did. But that was its own separate season, And that continued off. That continued off the original series, but it too had a proper finale in Angels of the Night, or something like that. But what one fan said, I think at Toon Zone, is that Gargoyles, when it ended with Hunter's Moon, allowed, opened the door for new adventures to be wrote. And that's what happened with Goliath Chronicles. Hunter's Moon, which was the series finale to the first Gargoyles series, opened the door for Goliath Chronicles. And that's how they look at with Gummy Bears. Gummy Bears, of course, ended with the two-parter King Ickthorn, which was the only two-part episode and debuted on Labor Day 1990. Yeah, Labor Day 1990, that episode debuted because that was the day, from what I understand, that New Year's, 1991, those were the days that the syndicated stations that aired the Disney Afternoon did a marathon of miniseries in movie format. They would do DuckTales. I think they did the Gizmo Duck one as well as the Bubba one. I think it was Gizmo Duck, mostly, I'm not sure. Then they did Gummy Bears, then they did Rescue Rangers, and then to cap it off, they did Tailspin. So, and these were all in unedited form. Uncut, unedited form. All of these. So, yeah, they aired a lot of those in movie format, and most of them, I think even Rescue Rangers, maybe I'm wrong, were all unaltered, unedited. Well, maybe Rescue Rangers was a little edited because you could tell the difference between the miniseries episodic airings and then the movie version. But still, again, like I said, most of the miniseries, pilot miniseries, or new season premiere miniseries were all aired in movie format. And this here, King Ickthorn, kicked it off. The King Ickthorn Gummy Bears series finale kicked it off on both Labor Day 1990 and New Year's 1991. They both kicked it off at that time. I'm not lying. They kicked it off around that time. Now, King Ickthorn was a decent finale because it allowed a lot of things to come full circle. You see, it did, I will admit, did take a common throp, if you will, or a common thread in media and all sorts of kind of big-time finales or whatever you want to call them, events. It finally allowed the villain, the antagonist, in this case Ickthorn, to realize that the only way he's going to succeed is he needs to find something that's going to help him take the gummies out, or at least weaken them to the point that they won't be an interference. Now, he does this by finding a termite called Big Tooth. And it's basically a termite that can basically chew up anything just like that. So anyway, he finds this Big Tooth, and he has the Big Tooth basically destroy Gummy Glen. And that was the one thing too about the Gummy Bear series. They would discover other glens out there that were now in ruins. And they were in ruins. They basically used to be like theirs, but were now in ruins. And that's the same thing that happened here. Theirs became now a ruined glen. So anyway, he does this. It draws the gummies out. And basically he forces the gummies, or at least Grammy Gummy, to make gummy berry juice for him, right? To make him and his soldiers, make him and his ogre soldiers strong. Well, here's the thing. She tries to, trick him at first because she had done it in the past. But again, this is the one thing about big events, and especially finales to a series like this. It allows the villain to kind of recall what had happened in the past and say, you know what? I'm not going to do this. I'm not going to fall for that trick again. I'm going to basically he says, hey, I'm not falling for it. I'm not going to have my ogres fall for it. I'm going to test it on one of your own. So after he tests it on one of their own, on Tummy, basically he threatens to have them boiled into the juice unless she does it correctly, and she does. So basically he forces her to do it correctly. Anyway, long story short, he uses all this to his advantage to finally conquer Dunwich. So he finally conquers Dunwich and becomes king. Now the one thing I will say about the animation style in part 1 of this was it was very similar in some ways to the animation style you would see in Sword in the Stone, Jungle Book, and Aristocrats, but mostly Sword in the Stone because it reminded me of that in so many ways. And then of course we got the standard animation in part 2, which was still good. But still, you know, the animation in part 1 was very reminiscent of what you would see in Sword in the Stone. Now, basically, as we got into part 2, of course, the Barbics got involved as well because Zummy went to, because not only had Zummy escaped Drekmore, but he was able to inform the Barbics of what was going on. Now, the Barbics do help, but at first, they don't want to help the human part of it. After they've done one part, they don't want to help the human part. Until Zummy basically has to show them visually what's going to happen to the great gummies and all that, or what's going to happen, because, you know, obviously Igthorn notices the great gummy ships coming in to shore. So he basically has to say, hey, look, if you think he's going to stop with them, you think he's going to stop with Dunwich? No, he's going to remember what you guys did, and he's going to come after you. So basically that convinces Ursa, who's a very popular character as well, and leader of the Barbics, to say, you know what, you're right. And she's like, basically like, you know what, you're right. You know, basically it makes Ursa realize that it doesn't matter what problems they have with this Igthorn guy, that the humans have with Igthorn, that they're going to end up having the same problems down the line. So basically they help. So basically they have to help kind of prevent the great gummies from being destroyed. Now Zummy, throughout all this, does get the great book back with the help of Calvin. And at the same time, well, even before that, Calvin is able to recover Cubby and Sunny from under some destroyed rubble, I should say, destroyed rubble of the castle, of the Dunwich castle, and basically discovered the Glen. Glen has now been destroyed, which, you know, is which really kind of hits Sunny Gummy, because it's like it's their home, and now it's not there anymore. You know, so it hits Sunny in a huge way, and it's like, okay, now we need to take care of business. Now we need to take Igthorn down, kind of deal. It kind of, because the thinking at first, okay, what do we do now? And, you know, it's like they realize after they leave, they got to basically stop